The Sleepless King. In a faraway kingdom, there once lived a king known for both his grandeur and humility. He had a loving and beautiful queen, and his palace was a masterpiece of luxury, adorned with shimmering chandeliers, silk-draped windows, and golden embellishments. His bed was as soft as a cloud, the sheets white as freshly fallen snow, and his room smelled of blooming lavender. Yet every night, the king found himself tossing and turning, unable to sleep. The sleepless nights stretched into weeks, then months. The king's eyes grew weary, dark circles forming beneath them. Servants whispered in hushed tones. Was the king cursed? Had a spell been cast upon him? One evening, as the queen busied herself selecting precious stones for her new crown, the king sat alone at the grand dining table. He picked at his food absent-mindedly. The queen, exhausted from her day, nearly dozed off before dessert. When a spoonful of ice cream landed on her face, she chuckled sleepily, kissed the king's forehead, and retired to bed. But the king remained awake, staring into the flickering candlelight. A strange restlessness gnawed at him. What was keeping him awake? Was something lurking in the shadows of the palace? Unable to bear the eerie silence, he decided to walk through the castle halls. As he descended the spiral staircase, the flames of the torches cast long, shifting shadows on the cold stone walls. Just then, he heard a faint clinking sound. His heart pounded. He followed the noise and found the royal treasurer in the treasury, counting coins under dim lantern light. Piles of gold and glittering jewels lay stacked before him. "The sleepless king," the treasurer murmured, startled. "Your Majesty, why do you wander at this hour?" The king sighed. "I cannot sleep. Something feels off." The treasurer thought for a moment and then handed the king a soft golden cloth. "This is what I use to polish the royal treasures. Every time I clean them, I grow so sleepy I can barely stand. Try it." The king took the cloth and polished each jewel, each coin, each sapphire and ruby until they gleamed like the morning sun. The treasurer yawned, thanked the king for finishing his work, and retired for the night. But the king, he was still awake. A chill ran down his spine. Why couldn't he sleep? Frustrated, he wandered toward the royal kitchen, where the air was thick with the scent of fresh bread. There he found the cook, his hands deep in flour, kneading dough. "Your Majesty," the cook exclaimed, nearly jumping at the sight of the king. "How do you sleep so soundly?" the king asked, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "Kneading dough," the cook replied. "It tires me so much that I can barely keep my eyes open." Desperate, the king rolled up his sleeves and plunged his hands into the soft, powdery flour. He kneaded and pressed until the dough was smooth. The cook, now satisfied, thanked the king and left. But the king still wasn't sleepy. Instead, his nose tingled from the flour dust, and he let out a loud sneeze that echoed through the empty halls. Something was not right. With a growing sense of unease, he stepped out into the moonlit garden. The wind whispered through the trees, and the leaves rustled like unseen footsteps. He shivered. In the shadows, he spotted the gardener, crouched in the grass, meticulously trimming each blade to the same height. His tiny scissors clicked rhythmically, a strangely hypnotic sound. "Your Majesty, why are you awake?" the gardener asked, not looking up. The king exhaled sharply. "I do not know." The gardener handed him the scissors. "Trimming grass tires me. Maybe it will help you sleep." The king knelt and began cutting the grass, one blade at a time. The night deepened. The garden was silent except for the soft snipping. The moon watched him, unmoving. Suddenly, a shadow moved behind him. The king froze. His heart pounded in his chest. He turned slowly. It was the queen. She stood there, wrapped in her silk robe, watching him with gentle concern. "My love," she whispered, "what are you doing out here?" The king sighed, exhausted. "I cannot sleep, and no one can help." The queen smiled knowingly. She took his hand and led him inside, through the empty halls, past the flickering lanterns and into their chamber. She handed him a glass of warm milk. "Drink this." The king took a sip, the warmth soothing his throat. As he lay back in bed, the queen whispered, "Would you like me to tell you a story?" Before she could begin, the king's eyes fluttered shut, and for the first time in months, he drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. The palace sighed in relief. The sleepless king had finally found rest.